Hello, welcome to Shmirchik Fascist Corner, where you experience all the unpleasantness that comes with me, including farting, sneezing, wheezing, eating, snoozing, sniffing, goofing, switching, itching, and everything else. You can handle that. Welcome. Anyways, I wanted to get to this thing with the laws that the Christians made regarding the Jews in early times, right? So, check that the system works. Early times. Yes, let's get with it. Okay. Jews in early Christian, okay, so this is religion and law in medieval Christian and Muslim societies. Jews in early Christian law, the Byzantium and the Latin West, 6th and 11th century. Edited by John Tolan, Nicholas D. Lange, Lawrence Fauchia, and Capuchin Nemo Peckelman. Prepols. Jews, Pagans, and Heretics in Early Medieval Canaan Law by David M. Friedenreich. Heretics, Jews, and Pagans, they have formed a unity over against our unity. Augustine Sermon 62.18. Let's make this bigger. The non-Catholics of whom Augustine speaks would surely be surprised to discover themselves grouped together, much less described as unity or uniform. There are, after all, vast differences between Christians of varying theologies, Jews who entirely reject Jesus' significance, Jews who we all reject unless you're mentally ill, like really mentally ill, and pagans who reject even the biblical God. Many Catholics, moreover, would also be surprised by Augustine's conflation of these groups of religious foreigners. Augustine is certainly not the only Christian to treat all non-Catholics as equivalents, and thus as subject equally to law that defend the interests of the Catholic Church and adherents. So if you're Protestant, you are like not Christian, which is crazy. The dominant trend in medieval Catholic thought, however, is to classify Jews, pagans, and heretics within an implicit or explicit hierarchy, more than paganism or any heresy. J.M. Wallace Hadrill observes, the Jews worried the conscience of medieval Christians. So the medieval Christians, we worried them. This is especially apparent in Latin Canaan law, which regularly portrays Jews as inferior to other non-Catholics, as especially stubborn in their resistance to Catholicism, and as uniquely threatening to Catholics. Early medieval Latin laws about Jews, therefore, differ in fundamental ways from those regarding either pagans or heretics. Most Latin canonical legislation from the 4th through 7th centuries derived from church councils convened in Africa, Gaul, and Spain. These councils addressed an eclectic set of subjects, and it is rare that a council devoted a significant percentage of its canons to non-Catholics. This article seeks to provide comprehensive citations of Latin canons related to Jews and to pagans, as well as extensive citations of canon related to heretics. Unlike prior studies of this nature, however, this work is organized neither thematically nor chronologically. Its structure instead draws attention to the ways in which the sources of canon law conflate or contrast different types of non-Catholics. The first section analyzes canons that address multiple types of non-Catholics, and thus represent Jews, pagans, and heretics as being equivalent, or of different legal status. We will consider in order canons that address all three types of non-Catholics, those that address Jews and heretics, and those that address Jews and pagans. We will then turn to canons that address conversion to and reversion from Catholicism. Reversion from Catholicism, so people who convert and people who go back to their original faith. These subjects are addressed regarding each type of non-Catholic, but never within the same canon. Finally, we will consider other canons that address individual non-Catholic religions and their adherents. Okay, so here is all the notes, right? The references. Okay. Modern scholars refer to the canons that relate to the Jews as Jewry law, not to be confused with Jewish law. The fact that no comparable terms exist for for canons related to other non-Catholics is telling. The fact that no comparable terms exist for canon related to other non-Catholics is telling, not only because it reflects modern scholarly interest, but also because no comparable set of laws exists regarding either pagans or heretics. So basically, there's no real laws that are written down regarding heretics and pagans, but for the Jews, there's like special laws against us, right? Whereas Jewy law primarily addresses Jews and only occasionally Judaism, canon law, regarding pagans and heretics, focuses almost exclusively on paganism and on heresy. Jewy law, moreover, represents Jews as the very antithesis of good Catholics. Pagans and heretics are not portrayed in this manner. So what is antithesis? Anti, against, thesis. Antithesis. Antithesis. What? No? Oh, come on, I can't. Why isn't it doing copy and paste? Anti. Oh, I can't copy it. So I have to go look it up here. Antithesis. A person or thing that is the direct opposite of someone or something else. Okay, so it's a direct opposite. Okay. So we are the opposite of good Catholics. The Catholics are all good and we are the opposite of that. Pagans and heretics are not portrayed in this manner. They're just heretics, right? Non-Catholics contrasted. Okay, we're gonna start now. Okay, I need to put on my hat. To combat the great light. Non-Catholics contrasted. Latin Church Council occasionally addresses Jews, pagans, and heretics within the same canon or set of canon. Indeed, the only specific references to Jews in African conciliar canons appear alongside heretics and pagans. All those bespattered with the stain of disgrace, infamia, it's like infamy, namely actors and indecent women, as well as heretics, pagans, and Jews, lack the right to denounce accused criminals before a court of canon law. So now it's starting to tell us exactly what it's starting to tell us what the laws are, right, regarding Jews, right? What the laws are. Okay. So it's starting to tell us the law. Lack the right and denounce accused criminals before a court of canon law. So basically, a Jew can't testify against a right? Hippo, this canon's conflation of non-Catholics reflects the perspective expressed by Augustine, the reigning bishop of Hippo. In this essay's epigraph, unlike actors and whores, whose legal status relates to the ill repute of their occupational pursuits, heretics, pagans, and Jews are declared infames on account of their beliefs. In other words, non-Catholics are disgraced simply because they are not members of the Catholic Church. This common denominator links pagans, heretics, and Jews in a 5th century canon from Gaul as well. The bishop may not prohibit anyone, whether a Gentile or a heretic or a Jew, from entering a church and hearing the word of God, until the point of the catechumen's mass. Everyone must have access to the gospel, even though only Catholics may witness or partake of the Eucharist. The reference in this canon to non-Jewish, non-Christians as Gentiles is commonplace in Latin canon law sources and reflects the conviction that Christians constitute the spiritual heirs of the people of Israel. They replace us, right? The First Council of Zaragoza simply forbids faithful women from sexual intercourse with alien men. In many cases, however, generic terms provide an insufficiently precise definition for pagans, heretics, and Jews. A particularly clear example appears in a set of canons promulgated at the Council of Elvira. What's canons? I keep saying like canons. What is it? Canons? The general law rule. Okay, it's the law. So the earliest a particular clear example appears in a set of laws promulgated at the Council of Elvira, the earliest council known to have published canonical legislation and law, right? Elviran laws forbidding marriage to non-Catholics demonstrate the hierarchical relationship in which Catholic clerics place those outside the church. No matter the large number of girls, Christian maidens are by no means to be given in matrimony to Gentiles, lest youth, bursting forth in bloom, end in adultery of the soul. So even people who are not Christian are considered Gentiles. The Christians call people non-Christian Gentiles who weren't Jews. Even though Christians, according to Jews, according to us, Christians are Gentiles, right? Catholic girls ought not to be given in marriage to heretics if they are unwilling to change over to the Catholic Church. So the Catholic girl can't marry somebody who is not Catholic, or they have to convert in order to be with her. They shall be given to neither Jews nor heretics, for there can be no fellowship for the believer with the unbeliever. So, yeah, I think it's clear, right? If a parent acts against this prohibition, they shall be excluded from communion for 5 years. You know what communion is, when they do that weird thing in the church and they drink from the wine and they say it's the blood of Christ, right? I don't see that as an insult to be excluded from such a thing. But that's not such a harsh punishment if you think about it, you know. If any should perchance join their daughters in marriage to the priests of the idols, they shall not be given communion even at the end. And it's so strange because, you know, the church is purely pagan. Christianity is 100% pagan, idolatrous religion, but they want to be the dominant pagan idolatry religion. They don't want any other idols to be accepted. They only want their idol to be accepted, right? It's hypocritical, right? These canons prohibit marriage to non-Christian husbands in all cases. These laws prohibit marriage to non-Christian husbands in all cases. Parents are only punished, however, if they give their daughters in marriage to Jews, heretical Christians, or worst of all, idolatrous priests. Marriage with Gentiles who are not priests, although discouraged, goes unpunished. What? So who are the non-Gentiles, right? Who are the Gentiles? Just regular people who have no faith. The distinction between Gentiles and their priests reflects the notion that ordinary pagans can be separated from their idolatry, and that only the latter poses a threat to Christianity. So who poses a threat to Christianity, right? Okay, so if a Christian person goes and marries people who are idolaters or just not Christian, they don't get really much of a punishment. But if they go to Jews, then oy vey. Oy vey. The clerics gathered at Elvira classify Jews and heretics. The clerics gathered at Elvira classify Jews and heretics as more objectionable than Gentiles, albeit not so objectionable as idolatrous priests. Striking, these clerics use Pauline language condemning interaction between Christians and idolaters in their canon, in their law about marriage to Jews and heretics. For what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowships, societas, is there between light and darkness? What agreement does Christ have with Beliar? Or what does the believer share with the unbeliever? It's like the infideli come infideli. So both Islam and Christianity have used the same word for non-believers, the infidel, right? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? I'm telling you, it's like so hypocritical that the Christians claim to be like the right thing and not pagan and not idol worship, when literally what they're doing is the definition of idolatry. Definition. Right? Elvirian clerics apply traditional language about one set of rivals in response to different rivals, now perceived as posing a greater threat to believers in Christ. With the Christianization of Roman Empire, Latin Christian discourse regarding foreigners comes to focus increasingly on heretics and Jews, the new unbelievers. Thus, only the earliest of the Gallic councils, the first council of Arles, in 314 addresses marriage to pagans, while several later councils forbid marriage to Jews. Well, according to Jewish law, we anyways can't, we anyways can't marry non-Jews anyway, so. No Visigoth councils address marriage to Gentiles, neither Gallic nor Visigothic councils address marriage between Catholics and heretics. Interesting. Okay. Law 16, Canon 16 of the Council of Elvira treats Jews and heretics as equivalent. The only other Latin synod to juxtapose these groups of non-Catholics is a single canon, a single law in the Council of Ipa 1 in 517, I think. So, Okay. If a cleric of elevated rank should participate in the meal of any heretical cleric, I'm a bit offended that we're the same as a heretic, right? Like, I thought, they would classify as something even worse than the heretic, like they should, the Jews are supposed to be, the demon and the devil, but here they make us equal to just heretics, so on the one hand I'm offended, on the other hand I'm pretty surprised, right? I mean, it's racist, but not that racist, right? If a cleric of elevated rank should participate in a meal of any heretical cleric, he shall not have the peace of the church for the duration of a year. If junior clerics do so, they shall be flogged. As for the meals of Jews, our laws have prohibited even a lay person from participating. Whosoever has become defiled by the meals of Jews shall not break bread with any of our clerics. Oh boy. The thing is, they're just upholding Jewish law, because we're not supposed to break bread with non-Jews. Even though this is discrimination, it's still not going against our Jewish law, right? Here, unlike Elvira 16, interaction with Jews is deemed a more serious infraction than interaction with heretics. Oh, so now it's more worse, right? They'll get flogged. They will be flogged. Okay, so only if they go with the heretics, they'll be flogged. But wait, so what happens to those who have meals with Jews? Okay, so if a person of rank should participate in the meal of a heretic, then they just can't participate in the church for a year. But if you go to the meals of the Jews, then you will be flogged. Oy vey. Here, unlike Elvira C. 16, interaction with Jews is deemed a more serious infraction than interaction with heretics. The prohibition against partaking of a meal with Jews applies to all Christians, not just clerics, and the punishment of excommunication is more severe than either temporary exclusion from the Pax Ecclesia or corporal punishment. So basically they're saying that the prohibition against partaking of meals with Jews applies to all Christians, not just clerics, and the punishment of excommunication is more severe than either contemporary exclusions from the Pax Ecclesia or corporal punishment. Similar prohibitions against commensality with Jews, moreover, appear in the canons of the numerous councils. Only 2 canons from the Latin West, in contrast, condemn commensality with heretics. What's commensality? Let's go see. Commensality. The practice of eating together. We observe above that the clerics gathered at Elvira apply we observe above that the clerics gathered at Elvira apply to Jews and heretics scriptural rhetoric that originally related solely to the pagans. Elvirian canons, Elvirian laws about food associated with Jews also employ scriptural rhetoric that originally relates solely to the heretics, even though those laws themselves make no reference to heretics. Those who possess agricultural produce, which they receive from God with an act of thanksgiving, are warned not to let Jews bless their produce, lest their blessing renders ours ineffectual and weak. So they're scared of our blessing because we're more powerful. If anyone dares to do so despite this prohibition, he shall be cast out from the church completely. People back then were very superstitious. So indeed, if any of the clergy or the faithful take food with Jews, it is decided that he shall be kept from communion in order that he be corrected as he should. The language of 50 is reminiscent of Paul's instruction not to share food with Christian sinners. Because Paul said it. I told you, that is why Christianity is a Jew-hating religion, right? Because he said, don't have break bread with sinners. Yet Paul permits eating with those who do not belong to the Christian community. The application of Paul's commensality prohibition, like eating with Jews, the not allowing to eat with Jews, reflects the equation of Jews and heretical Christians expressed in Canaan 16, and also suggests that Jews are sinners who have an especially pernicious influence upon the Christians with whom they interact. The Canaan Law 49 expresses this fear through its allusion to 1 Timothy, which speaks of a time to come in which some will renounce the faith by paying attention to those who demand abstinence from food. I don't understand that. Which God created to be received by the faithful with an act of thanksgiving. The authors of these canons, these laws, understand this prophecy to refer to Christians who accommodate Jewish food-related practices, and they thus imagine Jews as those who hypocritically speak falsehood and convey the teachings of demons. Yeah, this is why the whole entire, the entire Christian Bible is Jew-hating, right? Timothy, let's go see. Timothy, okay, I have to, 1 Timothy 4.3. 1 Timothy 4.3. They forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods which God had created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know the truth. Right? Forbidding to marry, right? It's written in the Bible, their New Testament. Right? Okay. Very good, right? The authors of these canons understood this prophecy to refer to Christians who accommodate Jewish food-related practices, and they thus imagine Jews as those who hypocritically speak falsehood and convey the teachings of demons, as written in Timothy, this over here, right? So let's go see. Timothy 4.1 to 2. Timothy 4.1 to 2. I charge you in the presence of God and Christ Jesus, who is judge to the living and the dead. What does it say? Paul Timothy to commit himself to preaching. It is in the final epistle of his life. Paul labors to impress on Timothy the seriousness of his charge. You can see how seriously Paul considers the preaching task by noticing 5 qualified phrases. Okay, I guess it's part of that, you know. It talks about all the stuff that is written here, right? Because we are the people who teach. We are demons, so whatever we say is demonic, according to the Christians, right? This is why Christianity is such a Jew-hating religion, right? I charge you, therefore, let's see what it says here. Paul described the members of the court. What does it say about the Jews? It's about us being demons, right? Right? Let's go see. It says a lot of stuff, right? Itching ears, itching head. Okay. Whatever. It says somewhere there that we are demonic, so it doesn't matter. Continuing on. Jews are juxtaposed with pagans in several Gallic canons and also in canon associated with the Council of Elvira. The Elviran canon, probably a later addition to the canons, promulgated at the council itself, applies the same punishment for adultery with a Jewish or Gentile woman implicitly, contrasting this punishment with the unspecified penalty for adultery with a Christian woman. The 5th century Gallic thing, it addresses the pagan practices of employing auguries and incantations alongside Jewish superstitions and festivals. Christians who observe either are barred from communion. These laws portray Judaism as indistinct from paganism. Of possible relevance in this context is the declaration by the Council of Narbonne: "No one, whether freeborn or slave, Goth, Roman, Syrian, Greek, or Jew, shall do any work on the Lord's day." Jews are here treated as one amongst several ethnic groups in a law that appears to address Christians and non-Christians alike. The same council also links these ethnic groups in its prohibition against harboring pagan soothsayers, whatever that means. So you're not allowed to have any people amongst you who are going to convince you of their pagan or Jewish ways. Early medieval sources also include a number of laws, canons, that express greater concerns about Jews than pagans. Thus, while the Council of Clichy forbids Christian slaveholders from selling their Christian slaves to pagans or Jews, it proceeds to focus exclusively on the illicit acts performed by Jewish slaveholders, namely their attention to convert slaves to Judaism and their overly harsh treatment of Christian slaves, according to the church, right? The Council of Chalon forbids the sale of Christian slaves beyond the border of the local kingdom, within which they can be redeemed by Christians, lest Christian slaves remain bound up in the chains of captivity, or even worse, in bondage to Jews. The thing is that, a lot of the, down in the South, right, when the Americans had slaves, black slaves, right, a lot of the Americans didn't want the slaves to be Christian, because if they were Christian, they would have to free the slaves, because according to the church, according to their religion, a Christian can't have a Christian slave, right? So that's why they refused to baptize the black slaves, because they wanted to keep them as slaves. Because if they would become Christian, they would have to free them according to their own thing, right? Interesting, no? The Fourth Council of Toledo forbids all Jews' possession of Christian slaves, explaining that it is sacrilegious for members of the body of Christ to serve the ministers of the Antichrist. Cleric expresses far greater concern about Jewish ownership of Christian slaves than about ownership by pagans, and Jews alone are associated with Antichrist. Indeed, numerous canons, numerous laws from Gaul and France address Jewish slave owners without reference to pagans. Oh, because we're the worst, we're the Antichrist, right? According to Jewish law, slavery is, the concept of slavery is, basically treating a slave, like, having a slave in your household there's laws regarding that. You have to treat them better than you treat yourself, right? And if a Jewish person hurts a slave in any way, the slave gets freed according to Jewish law, right? So any slave under Jewish ownership would actually have better treatment than how the Christians treat slaves, right? It's more like the Jewish person just, giving someone a place to live and treating them really well. Indeed, numerous canons, numerous laws from Gaul and France address Jewish slave owners without reference to pagans, whereas no laws focuses exclusively on pagan masters. Right. Okay. While not a canon, while not a law, the address of King Ajika to the 16th Council of Toledo, I think Toledo, Spain, right, fits this pattern as well. After instructing the bishops to uproot ongoing idolatrous practices among the peasantry, he states that it is more important that these bishops eradicate the perfidy of the Jews. The bishops follow King Ajika's lead, devoting their first canon, the first law, to the Jewish perfidy, and their second to idolatrous practices. So all these laws are more tough on the Jews than the idols, the idolaters. But again, I have to stress this again and again, that Christianity is pure pagan idolatry. And in and of itself, the essence of Christianity is pagan. Right? Canons that address Jews, laws that address Jews alongside pagans or heretics, portray Jews as equivalent to or worse than each of these other types of non-Catholics. The effect of this combination is striking, as quasi-pagans, Jews are the ultimate outsiders, and yet at the same time, as quasi-heretics, Jews are also especially dangerous insiders. Indeed, Jews are in some respects insiders to an even greater degree than heretics. Statuta Ecclesiae Antiqua states that bishops may not read any Gentile books, but may read heretical books as needed. Heretical books, right? So people like Jews and like idolaters. I think that's the heretics, right? The lack of reference to Jewish books suggests that as far as... Okay, so it doesn't mention the Jews. The lack of reference to Jewish books suggests that as far as Latin clerics were aware, all Jewish books are already considered Christian books because they are part of the Christian Bible. So they stole our Torah from us, and they made up their own narration, and like the whole thing doesn't make any sense, right? Right? As far as Latin clerics were aware, all Jewish books are already Christian books because they are part of the Christian Bible. One consequence of associating Jews with both pagans and heretics is that Christian authorities are able to apply to Jews an especially wide range of scriptural proof texts, as witnessed in the laws and the canons associated with Elvira. Another is that Jews become the embodiment of everything that Christians do not want to be themselves. The resulting image of the Jew is thus more negative than the sum of its attributes. This, in turn, shapes the legal status not only of practicing Jews, but also of those who seek to become Christians. Wow. Concerns about conversion and reversion. Imagine living in a time like this where you're Jewish, right? And you're looked at as less than, and you're tormented, and you're picked on, like discriminated on a daily basis, like the terror that these people must have felt, right? Which group benefited greatly from the slave trade? Everyone. Christians, probably. At different times, people were slaves. At different times, different people were slaves, right? So if you go look at the history when the Visigoths were around, right? The Visigoths are the Aryan Germanic tribes. They, at one point, enslaved the Jewish people, right? That were under them, and then they did many harsh things to the Jewish nation, and then at some points Jewish people had some slaves, and then at some point Christians had some slaves. Most of the time Christians had slaves. It was part of the culture in throughout history for people to own slaves. Like the Romans, for example, had slaves. It was normal, right? Concerns about conversion and reversion. The difference between Jews, pagans, and heretics stated explicitly in some canons and some laws are also implicit in many of the canons that address only one type of non-Catholic. As conversion is an issue that applies to all non-Catholics, laws on this subject offer a ready means for constructing comparisons between Jews, pagans, and heretics that do not exist within early medieval sources. Only at the Council of Elvira do clerics perceive a need to address the conversion of pagans. Such conversions, later clerics seem to feel, are the norm and thus require no special legislation. The thing is that the Christians, they think they're above the pagans. Meanwhile, Christianity is a pagan religion. It's the king of pagan religions. Elvira cleric required former pagan priests to undertake an exceptionally long 3-year conversion process before baptism. During this period, as catechumens, they must abstain from sacrifices. This canon reflects a deep skepticism regarding the ability of former priests to fully renounce their idolatrous ways. As we have already seen, Elvira clerics are far less concerned about other Gentiles. Those who, on their deathbed, seek to become Christian may be received immediately, because they're dying. Heretics, according to several Gallic councils, may also receive expedited deathbed conversions to Catholicism. Other issues raised specifically by the conversion of heretics include rebaptism and the integration of former heretics and their churches within the Catholic ecclesiastical hierarchy, both of which inherently apply solely to converts who are already Christian. I don't understand this. Right? So you can, if you're dying, then you can become Christian in no time. They just come baptize you and then you die. Canon about the conversion of Jews parallel in some respects. Laws about the conversion of Jews parallel in some respects the Alvarenc law about former idolatrous priests. So let's see how it works, because the idolatrous priests, if they wanted to become Christian, they would have to go through a 3-year process to convert. And let's see what they have to say for the Jews. Clerics gathered at the Council of Agde required Jews whose faithlessness frequently leads them back to their vomit to spend at least 8 months under examination as catechumens before receiving baptism. So they have to be under examination. Although an exception is made for Jewish catechumens on their deathbeds. What's catechumens? Let's go see that. Catechumens. Catechumen. Conversion. A Christian convert under instruction before baptism. Okay. Such fancy words. Before the conversion, right, they have to be under examination before receiving baptism. Although an exception is made for Jewish, people who are training to be converts on their deathbed. No fixed period of pre-baptismal preparation is specified by any Gallic or Visigothic Spanish council for other prospective converts. So the idolatrous priests, they need to go through 3 years of conversion training. Jews have to be under examination for 8 months before their conversion to be sure that they don't revert back into their the bad ways of the Jews, right? Concern about the reversion of Jewish converts to their former religion occupies the attention of the Fourth Council of Toledo as well, in part because of previous Visigothic attempts to forcibly convert the Jews of Spain. I just mentioned, right, the Visigothic people who forcibly converted the Jews and then they enslaved them in the end. Converts who return to the practice of Jewish rites are subject to priestly punishments. Oy vey, and barred from giving testimony. So, if you're a Jew who converts to Christianity, God forbid, and then you go back to Judaism, then you're not allowed to give testimony in court against anybody. For children of Jewish converts are to be raised in monasteries or by Christian foster parents to ensure their orthodoxy. So they take away your children. They basically kidnap your kids. This is Christianity. If you're Jewish and you convert, then you don't even have the right to raise your own kids. They take away your kids because you're not trustworthy enough to raise your children in the proper Catholic way. This is why Christianity is so evil. They don't even follow the 10 Commandments, The only Christians that follow the 10 Commandments are the Protestants, but the Protestants are considered fake Christians, right? The real Christianity, they are a bunch of thieves. They break the law that says don't steal, right? Faithful children of reverted converts are entitled to the property that might otherwise be confiscated in punishment for the parents' transgression. So, if Jewish people, they convert, right, their kids get taken away from them, And then if the parents decide to become Jewish again, to be practice Judaism, then their property is confiscated. But if the children of these reverts that went back to Judaism, if they went back and the children of these kids stay faithful to Catholicism, then they inherit their parents' property. If not, they lose their property. So theft. Christianity is thievery, right? Faithful children of reverted converts are entitled to the property that might otherwise be confiscated in punishment for the parents' transgressions. Baptized Jews, moreover, are forbidden from associating with unbelieving Jews because Jews are prone to sin. So, if you're Jewish and you get baptized, you can't spend time with your family or friends that are still practicing Judaism. You have to be separated. The Ninth Council of Toledo adds that baptized Jews must spend the biblical holiday in the presence of bishops so as to ensure that they celebrate the Christian feasts, but not the Jewish ones. So they don't even trust the Jewish converts. The 12th Council of Toledo confirms all King Ervig's civil laws governing the Jews, which seek to ensure that these Jews remain faithful Christians and do not revert to Jewish practices with respect to festivals, food, circumcision, and marriage. Right. It is striking that Visigothic canons, Visigothic laws, refer to converts from Judaism as Jews even after they have become Christian. Thus, Canon Law 61 of the Fourth Council of Toledo refers to baptized Jews. Baptized Jews. While the following canon prohibits association between the Hebrews brought over to the Christian faith and those who still persist on their old rites. So Jews basically who convert to Christianity cannot go anywhere near Jews who practice Judaism. It seems like that Law 60, which calls for the sons and daughters of the Jews to be raised by Christians, refers to the children of baptized Jews rather than the children of Jews who never converted. So you lose. It's a lose-lose situation, you know? There was also a law later on in the Christians made that they would, if a child was somehow baptized by somebody, then they can take the child away from the parents, from the Jewish parent who are not baptized, and raise them however they want. This is something that happened actually in the 1800s, right? Like a Jewish family had employed a Christian maid, and she said that she had to convert the child because the child was sick. She wanted the child to be saved, so she converted the child. Then when it came time to confess, right, in the confessional, she told the priests what happened, and then the priest told everybody, and then they went with the soldiers to the Jewish people's house, and they kidnapped the child, raised it as a Christian, and that was a huge stain on the church, right? They literally kidnapped this child and raised a Christian and then brainwashed him to be Christian, and he became a priest, and that was that, you know? Forcible conversions, right? It's just unbelievable, the crimes of Christianity, right? Hi, Zasty Zionist. Back, baby, don't fart on us. I don't know if I should watch this Jew or the Black. Tough decision. Hi, Brody. How are you doing today? I'm fine. Say what I think. I want me a Jew. Damn thieves. Right? The Christians. That includes Judaism. Yappity yap yap. Did Randy come back today, or is he still pouting in the corner? I think he's pouting in the corner. Right? So, this is why I talk about this stuff, because people don't know. People always accuse Jews of doing the most horrendous things, but, you know, knowledge is power. You just take the knowledge that you know and the documented evidence and throw it back in their face, right? Who's the one that stole Jewish children, right? Christians. Would you ever do a non-political religious stream? Sure. I have done non-political streams. Okay. How you doing? Brody. Is everything okay over there? I don't know. Okay. The canon of the 12th Council of Toledo, the law of the 12th Council of Toledo, ratifying King Erwig's Jewry laws, consistently referred to its target population as Jews, even as it insists that they must be good Christians. There are no grounds for reading into 7th century canons, 7th century laws. The 15th century Spanish notion of blood purity, used to distinguish old Christians from formerly Jewish new Christians on racial grounds. One does, however, find in these canons and these laws a precursor to such a distinction. Visigothic clerics presume that there is something intrinsic to Jews that makes them especially prone to reject the teachings of the Church, even after their conversion. In both the 7th and 15th centuries, doubts about the sincerity of Jewish conversions to Christianity were fueled by the fact that many Spanish Jews converted under compulsion, under force, right? They forcibly converted the Jews in Spain. The rhetoric of the Council of Agde, however, demonstrates that clerics were concerned about Jewish converts even when they willingly sought baptism. Right. So even if you went and tried to be a Christian willingly, they wouldn't trust you. Right? This degree of mistrust towards Jewish converts finds no parallel in laws regarding former pagans, despite the fact that numerous canons acknowledge the continued allure of pagan practices. So basically, I think the reason why they didn't really have the same problem with pagans reverting back to paganism was because Christianity is a pagan religion in and of itself, right? Whereas Judaism is purely monotheistic and not idolatrous like Christianity, right? So I think this proves why Jewish people are the right religion, whereas Christianity is the pagan practice, which they are hypocrite of practicing themselves. Right. She used to do tarot streams, but they take a lot of energy. Yeah, it does. You're doing good. Thanks, we're just chilling today. Very nice. Do I like my neighbors? No. Are IPT Jews? I don't know. You gotta give up that idolatry to convert to Judaism. Exactly. That's why the Christian church didn't really trust they didn't trust the Jews who willingly converted, or they didn't trust the Jews who were forcibly converted. They didn't trust Jews at all to be loyal to the church, because Judaism is opposite of Christianity completely. And the pagans they called pagan idolaters, who they forced to convert to Christianity, right? Or they willingly convert to Christianity. They were completely trustworthy because there's nothing to go against. Paganism and Christianity, it doesn't go against each other. It's the same thing, It's the same thing. They're both pagan. They're both idolatry, right? Why don't you like your neighbors? Because I don't like people. People are annoying. I don't like people. They're annoying. I think they're fine. I don't not like them. I just don't love them. God. Okay, the degree of mistrust towards Jewish converts finds no parallel in canons regarding former pagans, despite the fact that numerous laws acknowledge the continued allure of pagan practices, even though the Fourth Council of Orleans applies a scriptural proverb about returning to one's vomit to those who partake of pagan sacrifices after baptism. Neither this nor any other council imposes upon Gentile people who are preparing to convert, right? And converts the degree of supervision mandated for Jews. Latin canons, Latin laws, moreover, never refer to former pagans or Gentiles returning to practices associated with idolatry. Rather, they speak of a Christian who engages in idolatrous practices, or one who, after accepting the saving faith of baptism, partakes of pagan sacrifices. The prior status of these individuals vanishes with the act of conversion. So they just become one with the church, and then if they go and decide to do idolatrous practices, right, that are not Christian, then they're just considered Christians who are practicing idolatry. But the Jew, right? The only exceptions appear in the law from Elvira, which refer to former idolatrous priests. By that title, we have seen, however, that Elvira and Canaan's laws consistently classify priests separately from ordinary Gentiles. Church authorities perceive reversion to be... Hold on a second. So then, there are only some people who used to be idolatrous priests. They are referred to sometimes as reverting back to their idolatrous priestly ways, I think. They're not like ordinary Gentiles. I'm not sure I understand this, right? Okay. Church authorities perceive reversion to be the general rule among Jews, but unusual among Gentiles. So they say that it's a normal thing for Jews to convert back to Judaism, to become, because so we can't be trusted, right? But it's unusual for Gentiles, regular non-religious people that are not Christian or Jewish, to revert back to their old ways. The former, moreover, is the result of an inherently Jewish characteristic, while the latter reflects an individual's lapse of judgment. The former, moreover, is the result of an inherently Jewish... So it's a Jewish characteristic to just go back to your old ways, and the other people, if they go back to their old ways, it's just a lapse of judgment, right? This difference may reflect the fact that by the early Middle Ages, Catholic leadership, which hailed almost entirely from Gentile stock, regarded all Gentiles as prospective Christians. Gentiles would naturally be receptive to the gospel's inherently compelling message because they're untouched by the blindness of obstinacy, because, Jews were considered, stiff-necked and stubborn. In Toledo, that accounts for the Jews' inability to accept their great message of Jesus, right? The different nature of these canons, these laws about conversion and reversion, moreover, points towards a broader dynamic within canon law literature. Jews are portrayed in a fundamentally different way than pagans and heretics. Disembodied paganism and carnal Jews. It gets better and better, I tell ya. Brody, are you still there? Why you don't like your neighbors? She gets so pressed about that question. Jews aren't going to worship no man. Either Jesus can't go do that when you believe in one mythical God. Exactly. I'm introverted. Exactly. Sounds like Obama's people. LOL. Wavy. Oh, boomer. Haha. Okay, so hi, non-existent creature. My eggs are dead, if that's what you're asking. Brody, can you tell me, what do you think of my dress? I added a part at the bottom. Okay, nobody really told me what they think. Does it look funny if I walk out with it? Here, can you tell me? Brody? I added the bottom part. Can you tell? Does it look funny? Like if I go out. I don't want the Israeli people to laugh at me. Right? What do you think? Birdie? Are you there? You look very sensible. Time for a fart. I can't. Nah, it looks cute, and Muslims would approve. Less skin showing, exactly. Really? It looks okay? It doesn't look like I added and, like, funny? Saw this hustle that underneath the traditional everyday clothes had tattoos all over, mostly depicting symbolism from Hinduism. Yeah, there's Jewish people who once didn't know about Judaism, and then they learn about their culture, and then they're stuck with the tattoos, right? But of course, forgiveness in Jewish culture is huge, like God forgives, that's just part of Judaism, right? And somebody who actually somebody who's a Baal Tshuva, which means repented and came back to Judaism, right? They're considered on a higher level than the Jew who never went off, right? They're considered to have, their soul is much greater, right? Jeez. Western woman over here can't sew, can't cook. They want to be men, haha. Yeah? Hi, Sargon of Akkad. How are you? Sargon of Akkad, what do you think of my dress? It's prevalent in all the Abrahamic religion. What's my goals in life? Okay, Sargon of Akkad, what do you think? I added the bottom. Can you tell me what you think? Sargon of Akkad? Your honest opinion. Does this look funny? Brody said it doesn't. Does it look funny? I added it because it's too short. What's my goals in life? To learn. My goals in life is to learn. Right? To learn and to try to help people and educate people, educate myself, and maybe, just maybe one day to have a family. I look like a hippie queen? Thank y'all. So it doesn't look funny and weird, like people won't laugh at me in the street, right? To learn everything, like what we're learning now, okay? Okay, now we're going to return back to the law of the Christians regarding the Jews, right? Okay. Are you going to adopt kids? Nah. I don't adopt kids. No offense, I don't adopt kids just because I don't feel how do you say? I don't feel up to the challenge. I like that Sargon. I love hippies. My mother's from that era, that kick-ass, the hippie tool Indian woman. Very nice. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the story, okay? Disembodied paganism and carnal Jews. Uh-oh. Latin authorities are concerned about paganism as a disembodied phenomenon. Although these authorities ascribe to the church the responsibility of eradicating paganism, even among non-Christians, they devote their attention to pagan practices rather than pagans themselves. Thus, for example, the Second Council of Arles instructs bishops to root out practices such as the veneration of trees, springs, and rocks of unbelievers in their territory engaged in them. The focus of this canon is on the practices, not the unbelievers. Similarly, various canons forbid participation in pagan rites, the invocation of pagan deities, and receipts or consumption of sacrificial food, celebration of calends or other pagan festivals, the use of pagan songs at funerals and festivals. It's so mean. They're like taking away all these people's culture. And magical practices such as sorcery, soothsaying, divination, and augury. Other canons enjoin the destruction of idolatrous relics and temples. It's so hypocritical because Christianity is idol worship. None of these canons makes any reference to the non-Christians. Pagans are evidently separable from their paganism, to the point that in most cases they are referred to as Gentiles, a term with neutral or even positive balance. Just as canons about pagan practices, just as laws about pagan practices express no concern about pagans themselves. Laws about heresy devote only minimal attention to heretics. Latin church councils defined and anathematize various types of heresy, stipulate that heretical gatherings are not to be called churches, and dictate creedal language in response to heretical beliefs. To the extent that heretics do appear in these canons, they are to be ignored. Clerics may not engage in debate or even chant psalms with heretics, may neither offer communion to heretics, nor accept eulogies from heretics, and may not designate heretics as heirs. So basically, if somebody is Christian and they have a son that's not Christian, their son gets disinherited. Bishop gathers at the First Council convened in Spain after the Visigothic conversion to Catholicism blamed past neglect of canon law on the pressure of heresy or paganism. So because they neglected the laws on the people who are heretic and pagan, right, they, and even on the patronage of heresy, as if these phenomena existed without human actors. I'm not sure exactly what I was trying to say here, right? Like, heresy and paganism are both portrayed as disembodied threats to the spiritual well-being of the church and its members, and even in places where heretics and pagans were apparently numerous, Even if one accepts the argument of Yitzchak Chen that Gaul itself was thoroughly Christianized at an early date, Gallic Catholics were well aware of pagans just beyond the borders of the Merovingian kingdom. The rhetoric of African and Visigothic canons, moreover, the laws, testified to the perception among Catholics, clerics, or significant pagan and heretical populations. African canons address marriage and bequests to pagans and heretics as practical concerns, and complain that pagan worship sites and worship practices remain widespread. Similarly, the clerics gathered at the Third Council of Toledo declare that the sacrilege of idolatry has sprouted through almost the whole Spain. Oh boy. Idolaters themselves, however, are strikingly absent from the canons and of this and other Visigothic councils. A handful of canons, I think it's like writings and laws, of forbid Christian adoption of Jewish holiday practices along lines similar to those that address pagan practices. The vast majority of Jewry law, however, emphasizes the embodied carnal nature of the Jew. We have already seen that various canons portray Jewish slave owners as abusing their power to cause physical and spiritual harm to Christians, which is a lie, because Jewish law on slavery is the opposite of abuse. Visigothic canons, moreover, express specific concerns about the forced circumcision of Christian slaves, a deep carnal accusation, and concern about the malice Jews bear toward Christians also underlies the oft-repeated prohibitions against Jews exercising public offices that hold authority over Christians. Christians would appear, God forbid, to be subjected to Jews who would take advantage of their posts by causing harm to Christians. Concern of this nature is never expressed with respect to pagans or, for that matter, heretics. Canon law portrays Jews as unique among non-Catholics in their desire to harm Christians, whether physically, financially, or spiritually. The truth is, there is a lot of power in Judaism, right? They know we have the truth. The Christians know that Judaism is the truth because their entire book is based off of our Bible, and in lying about us and our Bible and trying to create a new religion based off of an older version, but in a perversion, in the most perverted way, right? So they feel threatened by the existence of the Jews, by the existence of Judaism, right? And also by the mind of the Jew. The mind of the Jew is very... The Jewish people are very smart people, you know? Like, we're smart people, you know? Not me in particular. I don't think I'm very smart at all, but other Jewish people, they're very intelligent. They are, you know, I wish I could be as smart, right? Okay, so where are we? Are you going to adopt kids? Haha, I like that jargon. I love hippies and mothers from their era. Kick-ass to any woman. She's a hippie kick-ass to the woman. You made me moist. Okay. I can't. But how will you contribute to the repopulation of the chosen ones after dealing with stuff for the past 100 years? I don't understand that question. Oh my, the non-existent creature is leaking. Toxic Shore, her family is huge. She's an aunt and uncle of like 1,000 kids, exactly. 10,000 kids, so exactly. Mira's path as a learner and educator is very admirable, exactly. Thank you, Birdie. IBL, the ideal man for you. Who's that? We stand with Palestine. Okay, whatever. Oops, why did Autoword put in uncle? God, good point, Brody. Wait a second. I'm an aunt, yeah. Right? IBL got a shard for you. I don't know what that is. What is your path, Toxic Show? What are you interested in? Party and BS? It's good to enjoy life, right? The path I want to be on is a nomadic traveler. I'm partly there driving a truck to deliver products, getting paid to travel. Sweet. And away from family a lot, though. You're away from family. Right? That's very sad to be away from family sometimes. Right? Yo. You're a trucker. That's so cool. Clerics gathered at the First Council of Macon, 581 to 83, the year, I think, After prohibiting Christian clerics and laymen from dwelling in convents or engaging in private conversation with nuns, declared that Jews in particular may not engage in such conversations or develop close relationships with the maidens. Apparently, Jews are especially prone towards illicit acts of sexual intercourse. These clerics also expressed their concern about the physical and spiritual dangers posed by the Jewish body in a canon that prohibits Jews from strolling about during the days surrounding Easter, as if for the purpose of mockery. Our existence is just there to mock the Christians, and forbids Jews to sit down in the presence of priests without permission. Oy vey. The Council of Narbonne prohibits Jews from chanting psalms while bringing the bodies of the deceased to the cemetery. They're very nice, you know. They want to take away our ability to just be Jewish, you know. Just, you know, Judaism is prohibited. Perhaps because clerics regarded this practice as distinctly Christian. So the Jewish way, right, is to basically, when a person dies, the Jewish people usually, they say Psalms of David as we accompany the body towards the grave, right? And then they say a prayer, they do Kaddish, and then also the, right? And also when a body is dead, right? On the night before the burial, right? Or even like if somehow the burial is delayed, there will be special people who sit with the body, and like they're considered shomer. They're shomer for the body. They have to guard the body against and say Tehillim, say the Psalms of David for the whole night. They just say it because to keep the dark forces from tormenting the soul, which is still connected with the body, right? So it's a Jewish thing, but the Christians, of course, you know, they have to steal, right? It's part of their culture. So they think it's a distinctive Christian thing, so therefore Jews can't say Tehillim now, you know? Suitable only in the funeral procession of those who have experienced salvation. So only if you're Christian you can say the Psalms of David. This is like so perverse, right? The money is so good. I'm taking this winter off because the trucker life is not healthy. I'm putting on weight. I'll be working out this winter. Wow. How do you make money driving cargo? The Fourth Council of Toledo anathematizes Christians who, in exchange for gifts, offer protection to Jews and thereby encourage the treachery of those who, for good reasons, are known to be members of the body of Antichrist, for they act against Christ. It is proper that whoever becomes a defender of the enemies of Christ should be separated from the body of Christ. First canon of the 16th Council of Toledo employs numerous metaphors of physicality. They have become harder than stone, walls of their unbelief, a diseased person inflicted with diverse ills to justify intensifying efforts to persuade Jews to convert. The final Visigothic canon regarding Jews, promulgated in response to an alleged international Jewish conspiracy to overthrow Spain's Christian monarchy. You know, it's so funny that, like, time and time again, the same thing repeats itself. The same suspicions surrounding Jews, it just repeats itself every single generation, you know? Decrees that, so they are afraid that the Jews conspired to overthrow Spain's Christian monarchy. Decrees that Jews be stripped of their properties, exiled from their homes, and bound into perpetual slavery, like in Spain in 694. The physicality of the Jew calls for physical punishments quite out of character with canon law literature, whose punishments are usually forms of penance or periods of excommunication. Jews, as depicted in early medieval canon law, are violent, immoral, deceitful, and disdainful of what Christians respect. Their carnal nature stands in stark contrast to spirituality cultivated by the Church and exemplified in the virgin monastics, to whom the First Council of Macon refers. Jews are not merely non-Catholics, but rather anti-Catholics, a point emphasized in the Fourth Council of Toledo's Antichrist rhetoric. For this reason, canon law treats Jews in a very different manner than heretics or pagans. So Jews are, you know, we're literally demonic, right? So where is the place of the Jew in early medieval canon law? In foreigners and their food, constructing otherness in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic law, I make the case that Christian authorities imagine Gentiles as non-Christians and Jews as anti-Christians. If Christians are assigned the numerical value 1, then Gentiles are 0 and Jews are 1. The analysis offered in the present essay offers further support for these theses on the basis of a data set that encompasses all early medieval Latin canon law about non-Catholics, not just laws regarding food. These sources reflect the way in which Jews and Christians are ascribed inverse attributes, opposite attributes. Jews do not merely fail to act in accord with Christian charity, they actively seek to harm Christians. Jews do not merely engage in sex, they engage in illicit sex. Jews do not merely lack knowledge of Christ, they stubbornly spurn such knowledge, even following their nominal conversion to Christianity. So even if they convert, they still are anti-Christ. This essay also demonstrates the degree to which Jews and Gentiles are imagined differently within canon law literature. The metaphor of 0 applies well to Gentiles, who are to considerable extent non-entities of minimal significance. Blank slates ready to receive gospel canons from the Council of Elvira, moreover, show that Christians' attitudes regarding the status of Jews, pagans, and heretics evolved and crystallized during the early Middle Ages. At the turn of the 4th century, the demerits of Jews and heretics were roughly equivalent. So then later on, in the Middle Ages, heretics and Jews became equally bad. And practitioners of idolatry still ranked at the bottom of the Christian classification system. Elviran canons demonstrate that the placement of Jews at the nadir of Christian society is not a foregone conclusion, nor can one say that this placement stems from the fact that Jews were the only religious minority in the Latin Christian world. What is a nadir? Nadir. The lowest point in the fortunes of a person's organization. The Jews at the nadir, we put them at the lowest point. We are at the lowest point, right? The placement of the Jews are at the lowest point of Christian society. And not a foregone conclusion, nor can one say that this placement stems from the fact that Jews were the only religious minority in the Latin Christian world. During the early Middle Ages, there were plenty of pagans in Western Europe and North Africa. The Christians' authorities could readily have chosen to treat all non-Catholics alike, as Augustine does in the quote with which this essay begins, and as rabbinic authorities do with respect to non-Jews. Christians could also have chosen to classify Jews above pagans on account of the similarities between Judaism and Christianity. There's no similarity. Much as Islamic authorities grant a relatively elevated status among non-Muslims to people of the book. The fact that canon law assigns Jews a status inferior even to the heretics and the pagans is especially surprising when viewed from the perspective of Jewish or Islamic law, which reserved for heretics the status of 1 on their respective spectrum of humanity. In light of these observations, the reason for defining Jews as anti-Christian must be theological rather than social, and it must relate to one or more aspects of Christian theology absent from Judaism and Islam. This conclusion is far from original, and the specific aspects of Christian theology in question are often identified as Jewish responsibility for the crucifixion and Jewish claims to the Old Testament. I would frame this argument in a slightly different manner. The definition of Jews as anti-Christians constitutes one element of a broader Christian effort to lay claim to the mantle of Israel's holiness. Right? So this is going to get a little bit more complicated, right? So, hold on. Tachlis authentisch. Okay. I would frame this argument in a slightly different manner. The definition of Jews as anti-Christian constitutes one element of a broader Christian effort to lay claim to the mantle of Israel's holiness. So, in the Torah, we are holy nation, right? So Christians are trying to hijack that, right? This effort is also manifest through the appropriation of Gentiles. Jews call the non-Jews Gentiles as a term of choice for non-Jews non-Jewish, non-Christians. So they stole that also from us. Christian authorities perceive Israel's holiness in zero-sum terms. Only one religious community can stand in a unique covenantal relationship with the divine and possess the authoritative understanding of divine revelation. The Jews, with their own claims regarding God and the Bible and the covenant with Israel, thus constitute the most threatening of heretics, even as they remain outside the bounds of Christianity. Unlike Gentiles, moreover, Jews cannot merely be dismissed as not Israel. Although the theological basis for Christian conceptions of Jews was already established in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, evidence from Elvira suggests that these conceptions did not become normative until some time after the Christianization of the Roman Empire. So, you see, here we see that the Christians tried to steal the Jewish identity as being special and holy. They tried to take that from us. Today we have non-Jews coming on my channel saying, oh, you're not the real Jews, you're the Khazari Jews. Oh, you're not the real Jews, the black people are the black Hebrew Israelites. They're the real Jews. You're just imposters. It's all like, it's an attempt to be special. Everybody is special. All humanity is special. No need to try to steal other people's identities. Right? Jews are just a little bit more special than you. That's all, because we are chosen to keep the commandments of the Torah, and it's a responsibility that we need to keep. And it's not your responsibility, and you should be thankful for that, right? You can keep the 7 laws of Noah and be a good non-Jew, and you'll be just as special as anybody else, as any other Jew. Jewry law, as formulated during the 4th through 7th centuries, contributes to the definition of Jews and Jews alone as anti-Christian. As such, it serves a different function from dhimmi law. Dhimmi law is like, low second-class citizens, third-class citizens who are pay taxes to be protected minority in Islam, right? Regarding the subject of non-Muslim, dhimmi law applies to non-Muslims without distinction, whereas significant portions of early medieval Jewry law did not apply to Gentiles. While both set of laws, for example, prohibit their subjects from occupying public office. So Islam doesn't like Jews or Christians to have public office. Christianity doesn't like Jews in particular to have public office. These laws communicate different messages. The Islamic version exemplifies the dictum: Islam is exalted and nothing is exalted above it. The Christian version, in contrast, focuses primarily on the narrower and more defensive goal of preventing Christians from being subject to Jews and the harm Jews would inflict, as if like we're like really bad. The onerous tax burden imposed on Jews by the 16th century of Toledo is designed to encourage conversion rather than to humiliate adherents of an inferior religious tradition, as in the case with the Quranic jizya. Christian authorities, at least during the Middle Ages, the early Middle Ages, evidently felt no need to establish the universal superiority of Christianity through laws relegating all non-Christians to second-class status. They didn't feel that need, right? But unlike Muslims, found it important to establish laws directed exclusively at the Jews. Comparisons that focus on the parallel contents of Jewry law and dhimmi law miss this crucial distinction. And that's the end of that, right? Which is pretty good. This is a pretty good thing about Jews and early Christian law, right? Got that done. Got that out of the way, right? Because it was important. I had to get that out of the way because, right? The money's good, haha, I'm taking this one there. How do you make money? Truck driving is high demand in the U.S. Most people don't want to do that work. I know a man that drives semis does doing that bump up your pay grade. Yep. I come from a farm family, so I've always had hazmat clearance. Clearance hauling the cargo is very profitable. Does one need more experience than doing regular light leads? Yep, I read about that yesterday. I'm twisting the Jewish word Gentile, right? Yes, most of the companies refer to you as having 5-minute. Hi, Cyclone Steve. Thanks for the compliment. You're so sweet. Your kindness is everlasting and merciful, and you just, it feels so good. Thank you. Can I do the bathroom? I need the bathroom. Right, baby? Right, baby? Right? Right? Mm-hmm. I like Mirror. So how does it feel to be wrong? Wow, he comes around and he takes a huge L. I'm alright. Thank you very much, toxic Showa. Jew hater. But at least he's not being mean at this second, right? Give credit where credit's due. Dos is dos. Right? Okay. Now we're gonna talk about more stuff. Okay? About Jew haters and goblins. Jew haters and goblins. Okay. Judaism in the Christian eye. This is something I have to read. Right? Okay. Pogrom Farhud. Should we go read that? The Pogrom Farhud against the Jews of Baghdad. I feel like I'm in the mood to talk about, like... I feel like talking about... Hold on. Okay, the pogrom against Jews of Baghdad in 1941, known among the Jews as the Farhud, the destruction. Right, there's that. Then there is this. Okay, Venice, ghetto, Venice. The ghetto in Venice, the Jewish ghetto. Should we read that? Because it's been sitting here for a long time, right? Neither who Jew are just stating the obvious, which gets someone called the anti-Semite. You're stating lies that you've been taught from a young age, which is really sad. It's like as if you're brain damaged, right? I'm sorry that you've been lied to so much. It's sad. Okay. 1516, Venice. Let's turn this off. In 1516, this is like 16, 17, 18, 19, 500 years ago. In 1516, Venice's ruling council confined all the Jews in a small area not far from today's train station, where there has been ghetto or foundries. The gates were locked at night, and restrictions were placed on Jewish economic activities. Jews were only allowed to operate pawn shops and lend money, trade in textiles, and practice medicine. They were permitted to rent, but not to own real estates. Although restrictive, the ghetto also provided a safe haven for Jews from the violence and aggression against non-Christians. on the economically and politically strained Venice of the early 16th century. Despite these severe limitations, the Jewish community prospered in Venice, receiving better treatment there than in many other European cities at the time. Right, so it looks like they were kind of lucky at the time, right, to have the ghetto where they can, like, protect themselves somehow. They were allowed to leave the ghetto during the day, but were marked as Jews. Men wore a yellow circle stitched on the left shoulder of their cloaks or jackets, while women wore a yellow scarf. Wow, such lovely Christians, so sweet and tolerant. Later on, the men's circle became a yellow beret, and still later a red one. The first Jews to settle in the ghetto were the Central European Ashkenazim, who settled in the ghetto Novo. They built 2 synagogues, the Scola Grande Tedesca in 1528 to 29, and the Scola Canton in 1531 to 1532. Next came the Levantine Jews, who practiced the Sephardic rite. When they got their own neighborhood, the Ghetto Vecchio, an extension of the Venetian ghetto granted in 1541, they built the Levantine synagogue. So this is the pictures of the synagogue. This is the synagogue? Yeah, I think this is the synagogue. It's beautiful. Really. What's this? It's a drain. These are some texts, right? Paintings from the old times, right? Oh, there's more stuff. Wow, look at that. This is like Jewish symbol, which is usually on the Aron Kodesh, right? On the Holy Ark, like where we put the Sefer Torah, where we put the Bible, the scrolls. We put it in the place, and this is the design on the curtain, right? It's a Star of David, and it's 2 lions and a tree. Because like the Torah is like the tree of life, and then this is a tes and a pei, and it says Sadik, which means righteous. It says lehamar. I don't know what that says. It's not clear. This is. Hold on. What's this? This is. I don't know what this is. We'll learn about it, I guess. And that's the last picture. Okay. Mixed in with the poorer Ashkenazim were Italian Jews who had migrated north to Venice from central and southern Italy. In 1575, they built their own Italian synagogue. In 1633, the ghetto Novissimo was built to house 20 Sephardic families. Over the years, the number of schools in the ghetto increased to 9, of which 5 survive today. Levantines and Ashkenazim, Italian and Spanish Jews all lived together in the ghetto through hard times. Who are the Levantines? Let's go see. Levantines. The Levants is an approximate historical geographical term referring to a large area in eastern Mediterranean region of West Asia. So there were Jews who were from Levantine, Western Asia. Okay, so the Levantines, Ashkenazim, they all were together in the ghetto through hard times, including the plague of 1630 and better times, until Napoleon threw open the gates in 1797 and recognized equal rights to the Jews of Venice. At its height, around 1650, the ghetto housed about 4,000 people in a space roughly equivalent to 2.5 city blocks. Wow, that is so small. Wow, they're like crammed in a ghetto. Before World War II, there were still about 1,300 Jews living in the ghetto, but 289 were deported by the Nazis, and only 7 returned to the ghetto, right? The Jews of Venice, the first Venetian document, so far as we know, in which Jews are mentioned in a decree of the Senate dated to 945, exhibiting captions of ships sailing in oriental waters from taking on board Jews or other merchants. Okay, so this is the story which I was reading that said that at a certain point the Jews were not allowed to go on ships going anywhere. Right? The first Venetian document, so far as we know, in which Jews are mentioned, is a decree of the Senate dated to 945, prohibiting captains of ships sailing in oriental waters from taking on board Jews or other merchants, a protectionist measure which was hardly ever enforced. But it was still like a law, right? According to the census of a city according to the census of the city, said to have been taken in 1152. So there was a census taken in 1152. The Jews in Venice numbered 1,300, which is nothing. An estimate which Galliccioli himself believed to be excessive. An event which must have increased the number of Jews in Venice was the conquest of Constantinople by the allied Venetians and French in 1204. Wait a second. So, okay, the Levantines and the Venetians are different people, right? Right? Then the former took possession of several islands in the Levant, including Eboe, where the Jews were numerous. At that time, Jewish merchants went to Venice for the transaction of business, with some of them settling there permanently. So they came from the Levant places, right? The Jews came from the Levant, and then it was that whole thing that happened, and the first lasting settlement of Jews was not in the city itself, but on the neighboring island of Spinalunga, which was called Giudecca. In a document dated 1252, for some unknown reason, this island was afterwards abandoned. Maybe because it had too much snakes or something. I'm just assuming, right? You have a condition as well, I assume. Wondering what your education was like, what kind of things you were told as a kid or heard family members say. They were bawling for that historical period. Christians make this woman see, laughing my ass off. Baked needs to meet her. Ah, shit, so much for chilling day off. Gotta go help my sister. Her ride didn't show up. Take care, I'll catch you around. Bye, Brody. Is it true that Jew semen is green? Wow, you're crazy. She is in a mania. Okay, stop chatting. Other merchants, live chat, not top chat, not. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I forgot. Thanks, Danger. 592, sorry. Okay, going back to the story of Jewish life in Venice, right? As far as, Jewish education goes, right, what do we learn? We learn Tanakh. That is the actual, that takes up a majority of our education, is learning Bible, right? Learning the Nevi'im, the Kesuvim, we learn the Hasidic thought, we learn, it's an endless, the Bible is very deep, There's the Tanya, there's the Nevi'im, which is the prophets. We learn the Talmud. We learn the Midrashim. We learn all the Bible, right? That takes up a majority of Jewish education, which is it's learning, right? It's learning about the Jewish law, right? And on top of that, we learn about Jewish history, as well as if we're given like where I grew up, half the day was for Jewish studies and half the day was for secular studies. So, for example, in the Talmud, like a lot of the Jewish, I'm not sure how it works, but the Jewish men, they don't even need secular studies because there's a lot of math in the Talmud, right? So they learn already all those, they learn astronomy in the Talmud, they learn, it's very complex Jewish studies, right? And so, that's what Jewish people learn. We learn Jewish history, we learn secular history, we learn about the history, like, of the conquest, the Crusades, we learn it, like, basically, it's a very balanced education, right? Jewish education is actually top-notch, right? So, what are tiers of Judaism? Tiers. Can you simplify that word? How about the Kabbalah? The Kabbalah is like Tanya. It teaches the Sephiros of the world, right? It teaches about the different worlds, right? It teaches about the different levels of different souls, right? It teaches about, it's very, very deep, right? And that is why Jewish people are so smart, because it's, the studying it's just so, it takes up so much of the time, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and the discussions and the arguments and everything in the Torah is sweet. The Torah is sweet for the Jewish people, right? And this is why Jewish people are so smart, because of the education, right? Have you ever been hit by a man? Yes. or graped a little bit. I don't know why you're asking that. It's a little bit weird question. It's a weird question, don't you think? Don't you think it's a weird question to ask, right? Okay, at the beginning of the 13th century, some Jews went to Venice from Germany, some seeking refuge from persecution, others attracted by the commercial advantage of this important seaport. A decree of the Senate dated 1290 imposed upon the Jews of Venice a duty of 5% on both imports and exports. Oh, so they had to pay taxes, especially for the Jews, right? Rabbi Shimon, so we were discriminated. Rabbi Shimon Lazzato, 1580 to 1663, speaks in his noteworthy Discorso circa il stato degli Hebrei di Venetia of the Jew who was instrumental in bringing the commerce of the Levant to Venice. So there's a lot of like business from Venice, and this Jew brought it to Venice from the Levant. So he helped the business of the place of Levant, which is like East Asia or somewhere, and to help integrate it into Venice society, bring the goods there. In an ordinance of 1541 issued from the Senate on the advice of the Board of Commerce to provide Jewish merchants with storehouses within the precincts of the ghetto, observes that the greater part of the commerce coming from Upper and Lower Romania is controlled by itinerant Jewish Levantine merchants. Right. So there were merchants from these areas that were Jewish that they brought in a lot of business, right? So that would boost the economy. But then because we were successful, then we have to be imposed taxes on us, right? When the Katavari was commissioned, not only it's from discrimination and it's from jealousy, right? When the Katavari were commissioned in 1688 to compile new laws for the Jews, the Senate demanded that the utmost encouragement possible should be given to those nations, referring to the various sections into which the whole Jewish community was divided, for the sake of the important advantage which will thus accrue to our customs duties. Okay, so I don't understand this, right? The utmost encouragement possible should be given to those nations, referring to the various sections to which the whole Jewish community was divided, for the sake of the important advantages which thus accrue to our customs duties. The right of the Jews to reside in Venice always remained precarious. Their legal position was not regulated by law, but was determined, as in the case of other foreign colonies. So it was just like whoever was in power, they decide they're in a bad mood. Okay, kill the Jews or expel them. By condotti granted for terms of years, and the renewal of which was sometimes refused, the Jews indeed were twice expelled and compelled to retire in Mestre. Oh yeah, and Captain Content, you want to know who hurt me? It was a non-Jewish man who was actually either from Spanish descent or Muslim descent, right? He hit me, right? Non-Jewish man. How come the founders of Kabbalah were schizo mode? What, schizo mode? I don't understand the question. Why do your promoters call you Jew whore on the IP2 site when posting your link? I have no idea. Maybe you can help me with that. Mathematics and sciences are said to appear in religious texts outside of Judaism, although the precision would be in question. Outside of Judaism. It's in both. It's in Judaism. It's in, there's a lot of wisdom that can be learned from, I did a whole thing on philosophers that were even before Judaism was created. There were certain philosophers that had very deep understandings of science, right? And then, as the years went on, the people forgot this wisdom, right? And then finally we came back to the wisdom of the scientists back then, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And we regained that knowledge, right? Was it Max? He was a guy who was behind the counter, right? Captain Content hit you. I don't know. The original founders went nuts, lost their minds. Why is that? I don't understand what you're saying. Who were the original founders? They went nuts. I really don't get what you're getting at. Okay. Although Jews were allowed to conduct business in Venice throughout the 14th century, they were not permitted to remain in the city for more than 15 days at a time, and in 1434 they were obliged to wear a badge. Wow, in 1434, wow. While the restriction to 15 days residence does not seem to have been enforced long, other repressive measures followed. Schools for games, singing, dancing, and other accomplishments, di qualsiasi dottrina, were prohibited, and so was all association with Christian women. Professions, except for medicine, were also prohibited. Aha, so they were allowed to be doctors, which is good, right? But everything else was prohibited. We were discriminated against. In the second half of the 15th century, the Jews of the entire republic were menaced by the clerical agitation against Jewish moneylenders. Right, so it's just we can never catch a break, right? A much more serious fate befell the Jews of Trent when the monk Bernardino da Feltre accused them of the murder of a Christian child. Yeah, in 1475. This is the how do you say, this is the cycle, you know? The Christians, they were so kind to us. They accused us of murdering their children when it was not true. Blood libels, which were debunked over and over again. And, you know, Jews were framed for this, and they paid for this lie, right? And then the Christians come today and be like, oh, Jesus is your savior. Yeah, fuck Jesus. Fuck Christianity, right? Although the Doge of Venice, Mocenigo, issued a strong manifesto for the protection of the Jews, he could not prevent a similar trial for ritual murder from taking place in Venice itself a few years later, attended by the same atrocious methods of procedure. Wow. This is Amber. He always comes in. I wish I had a porch. I wish I had a porch where I can just like. Little pee. No biting me. The expulsion of the Jews from Spain from 1492 and Portugal from 1496 brought many exiles to Venice, and among them came, after many peregrinations, the celebrated Isaac of Bravanel, who during his residence in Venice had occasion to use his diplomatic skill in settling certain difficulties between the Republic and the King of Portugal. Times of peril now followed for the Republic. In 1508, nearly all the states of Europe, including Austria, France, Spain, and Papal States, and Naples, united in the League of Cambrai against Serenissima. The common danger had the effect of relaxing the enforcement of the anti-Jewish laws, and of drawing Jews and Christians together in more friendly relations. Jews from various areas sought protection in Venice. Jews began to arrive in the city, joining other minorities, to which the government had assigned areas of residence. However, for the Jews, further measures were established. They were given a segregated area. Yeah, the black people, they think they were segregated. Apartheid and all that. Yeah, we were thrown into ghettos and segregated, and we couldn't have jobs. And I mean, at least the black people had, like, Africa, where they lived. Like, it was their country, right? Even if they were poor. Enclosed by walls and gates shut down at night, in which the contact with Christians would be limited. The first ghetto was born. Synagogues, formerly scattered throughout the city, were now permitted only in Mestre, but before long a new concession allowed them in Venice again, though only in the ghetto. The settlement of Jews in Venice brought along not only economic advantages to the Republic, because we're always good at making everybody rich, but made Venice once one of the most important centers of Hebrew printing in Europe. Although Jews, with a few exceptions, were not allowed to own printing presses, Christian printers invested in Venice and gave birth to the modern Jewish canon. Daniel Bomberg, among them, published some of the most important works of rabbinical literature. Humanism had sparked interest in new ways to read the scripture. In the culture and tradition of the Jews, as well as the Hebrew language, the possibility of large production of volumes created enthusiasm, as both Jews and Christians had an interest in commissioning books. Printing, however, created new challenges. On one side, it changed the attitudes of rulers, especially the papacy, towards Jewish knowledge, which was becoming more widely available, and in their eyes, more dangerous. They didn't want Jewish books to be printed because then people will like what's written in there. It also affected the Jewish world, which suddenly had to confront the issue of textual authority. Textual authority. What does it say? On a completely different scale. Systems of internal control were established both to curb the Christians, their church's reaction, as well as to guarantee a unity of visions. And traditions that, up to that point, had allowed for a wide range of versions. If on one side, the press expanded Judaism's reach, on the other, it forced it to adopt normative canons and restricted its practices. A wide range of versions of what? Different visions and different versions and different poetries and literature and different ideas printed? The printing revolution, right, Raspberry? Is it the printing revolution? Yes. I love it because there's trash. I love trash. Yes. In 1553, however, the prescription of Hebrew literature by the Inquisition began, and all copies of the Talmud, which could be found in Rome, Venice, Padua, and other cities, were confiscated and burned, which was one of the biggest tragedy in Jewish history, because a lot of the Talmud was lost. A lot of the information was lost, right, from ancient times, right, from even before, like few hundred, like 1,000 years earlier than this, that was lost. So, it is like a real tragedy for the Jewish people. In 1527, another expulsion took place, although it probably affected only the moneylenders, who withdrew to Mestre, but were permitted to return to Venice for the time necessary to sell their pledges. In 1534, they were called back. At this time, the Jews organized themselves into a corporation called Universität. Since each man wished to preserve his own nationality, according to the country from which he came, the Universität was divided into three national sections: Levantines, Germans, and Occidentals, the last name being applied to those who came from Spain and Portugal. The administration of the whole Universität was in the hands of the council of 7 members, 3 chosen from the Levantines, 3 for the Germans, and 1 for the Occidentals. Many laws were passed, furthermore, to regulate the whole international administration of the community. According to Schiavi, an internal tribunal was also established to adjudicate both civil and criminal suits, but later on the Council of 10 limited its power to civil suits, and in these it could act only when the parties appealed to it. The most powerful weapon of which the heads of the community could avail themselves was that of excommunication. Also, it appears that legally, at least the exercise of it was not left wholly into Jewish hands. I don't understand this whole part. It says the Jews organized this, right? So then how did the non-Jews get involved, right, in civil suits and all that, right? The most powerful weapon of which the heads of the community could avail themselves was that of excommunication. Although it appears that legally, at least the exercise of it was not left wholly in Jewish hands, Galliccioli records at length a successful appeal presented to the Patriarch of Venice by the heads of the university for permission to excommunicate those living in the ghetto who neglected their religious duties, and the author adds that the right to give this authority had been in the hands of the Patriarch until 1671, when it passed to the Kataveri. It does not appear, however, from any subsequent document that the Jews held strictly to this dependence. Schools for study were naturally among the most important institutions of Jewish life. In Venice, at all times, in addition to Hebrew, they cultivated secular knowledge. Although restricted to the ghetto, the Jews moved throughout the city. In the 16th century, when gambling raged in Venice, it also affected the ghetto, and the Jews and Christians often played together. Although the government had already imposed penalties upon gambling, the heads of the Universität saw that the measure remained ineffective, and they pronounced excommunication in the synagogue against those who played certain games. It sounds like a good time. Yeah. Excommunication failed. Leon of Medina, whose reputation was seriously stained because of his addiction to gambling, wrote a long protest against his own excommunication, which he declared illegal. The ban, he said, only drove people to worse sins. In all his long discussion, there is no sign of the fact that pronouncing of the excommunication was dependent on any but the Jews themselves. It appears from the discussion of Leon of Modena that the number of Jews then in Venice was little more than 2,000, although some scholars think the number was higher. According to a census from 1659, 4,860 live in Venice. Many Jewish societies had been confraternities, and confraternities were active in Venice, including the Society for Ransom of Jews who had been taken prisoners. Wow. This was like a common practice, of the non-Jews. They would steal people and then ransom them to the families, right? For a certain price. It's common, Especially Jews who had sailed on Turkish ships from Constantinople and other Oriental ports and had fallen into the hands of Knights of St. John, who waged a fierce and continual warfare against such ships. So, first of all, gambling is forbidden in Judaism because it's just addiction where you just lose all your money. And it's just stupid, right? The Venetian society had a permanent Christian delegation on the islands of Malta, whose duty it was to alleviate the lot of wretched captives as far as possible and to conduct negotiations for the ransom. In 1571, after the Battle of Lepanto, in which the Venetians and Spaniards conquered the Turks in the contest for the island of Cyprus, the danger of expulsion returned to threaten the Jews of Venice. During this war, much ill feelings had arisen in Venice against the Jews because of one of their co-religionists, Joseph Anasi, was said to have suggested the war, and many Venetians suspected that the Jews of the city had sympathized with him. Oh, it's the Jews' fault, right? It's the Jews' fault. Again, the conspiracy, right? After the victory, the Senate ordered the end of the condotta within 2 years, when all Jews should leave the city. This decree, however, was later revoked. Wait, so... In 1572, Sultan Salim II sent to the Rabbi Solomon Ashkenazi, who both as a physician and as a statesman possessed great influence with the Divan, as a special ambassador to the Senate, charged with a secret mission to conclude an offensive and defensive alliance between the two states against Spain. This is like politics, right? The Senate received him with all the honors due the ambassador of a great power, and although it did not accede to his proposals, it sent him back with presents. Ashkenazi availed himself of this opportunity to defend the cause of his co-religionists, and he seemed to have obtained not only the revocation of the decree of expulsion, but also the promise that such expulsions should never again be proposed. So here it says that after the war was won, they wanted to expel the Jews in 2 years, but then he got his favor, because he was somewhat successful in whatever, and so he implored the government for his people, the Jews, and let's see what happened. While the administration of the Venetian Republic was always under papal influence, a spirit of comparative tolerance prevailed there, and the Jews, like other minorities, including the Germans and the Greeks and the Albanians and the Turks, were free from restrictions in their worship. Well organized and strong, the Republic always maintained order. The condotti were religiously observed. What's the condotti? Let's see, what is that? Condotti. Leader in large scale. Leader in large scale. The condotti, the leader, was religiously observed, and the lives and the property of Jews were protected. Local outbreaks against the Jews were a rare occurrence and were quickly followed by exemplary punishments. So if people went against the Jews, then they were punished. That's just great. The Inquisition existed at Venice, although it was not admitted until 1279. After long opposition, but its jurisdiction extended only over Christian heretics, and even over them its power was much restricted. But this was later on, because what year was this? No, this was beforehand, right? Nevertheless, the Venetian tribunal maintained strict control and censorship over the Jews and other groups. So it was equally, everybody was equally being censored. In 1553, the council granted Kalanimus, a Jewish physician, the means necessary to keep his son at his studies, so that he may become a man useful in the service of this illustrious city. illustrious city. In the great financial stress in which the Republic was placed during the long and expensive war with the Turks, heavy taxes were imposed on the Jews. So you see, at different times, Jews were like picked on, and then they were, Most important of all was the activity of the Jews in maritime commerce. In 1579, in the interest of this commerce, permission was extended to many Jews of Spanish and Portuguese extraction to move from Dalmatia to Venice, where they received privileges which were obtained for them by their co-religionist Daniel Rodriguez, who was then Venetian consul in Dalmatia, and who was highly esteemed by the Republic for his important services in furthering its commerce in the Orient. So they were involved in business, right? Naturally, this maritime commerce continued to be favored by the government, and in 1686, the Portuguese Aaron Uziel was the first to obtain a patent for free commerce under the Venetian flag in the Orient and Occident. He was one of the first ship owners of the Republic. He traded with Zante, Cephalonia, Corfu, and Constantinople, and his business was so great that in 20 years, he paid 451,000 ducats to Venice in duties. This is a Jewish guy, I think. So they're very good in business, it looks like. In taxes, he paid a lot of money. Among other Jewish ship owners. So, if the Jewish people were successful, usually the economy would be boosted, because when there's taxes to be paid, the Jews have money to give to taxes, right? And they get the whole flow of commerce going, right? In the entire economy and the entire country. Which is why it's good to have Jews in your country. Right? Let me take a drink. After this, I have to go and I have to walk my dog. This is the evening. Right? It's the evening. Right? Have I ever met a Puerto Rican Jew? Probably. I don't remember. Well, that's all. I hope this works out for him. What's this? What's this all? What's this? Spanish descent, was it Max Monsoon? Do you dress up for Halloween? No. The Christian clergy was pretty much the mafia at the time. My Jewish uncle rode his bike to get his groceries in Vegas, and black men stole his bike. Do you have any advice for him? Go to the police. I don't know. Carry pepper spray? Excommunicado. Wow, that's awful. Hope things work out for him. Have you ever met a Puerto Rican Jew? Probably. There's all different kinds of Jews. I keep hearing about the USS Liberty. Doesn't anyone know about that? Oh, blah, blah, blah. Pet the cat. Forbidden in the Abrahamic updates as well, so the only solution is to travel to a destined area for it. In Turkey, it's illegal. What's illegal? Pet the pussy. Is that a Navy ship which suddenly and out of surprise took a beating oddly from its so-called allies? Show us the map where Dalmita has no cheating. Wonder is Israelis visit Aria in the West Bank. Do you agree with Street Shifter? I don't know who that is. With age, these genes begin to activate. Oh, Jeezer should call a Jewish lawyer to get his bike back. That's a good idea, actually. The Jews are the best lawyers. Alan Dershowitz, right? Among other Jewish ship owners, one of the most important was Abraham Franco, whose duty it was to provide for the loading of 6 merchantmen. To come down to more recent times, special mention should be made of the 2 brothers, Baron Giuseppe Treves de Bonfil, the ancestor of the present barons of that time, and Issaco Treves. On account of the expedition which they undertook for the first time in the Western Hemisphere, they sailed under the Venetian flag with a cargo of flour and other goods, returning with coffee and sugar. Giuseppe Treves received the title of Baron from Napoleon I on account of his great service to the city. both commercially and otherwise. Right? So you see the Jews were contributing, right? Doing trade, right? Domestic trade continued to be limited legally to secondhand goods. But as a matter of fact, this nominally restriction counted for little, and with the growing of the city, liberty of trade grew also. In the shops of the ghetto, wares of all sorts were sold, among them glass, decorated crystals, gold ornaments, tapestries, embroideries, and books. A trade of special importance, against which ineffectual prohibitions were several times issued, was that in precious stones. The sovereigns of Europe were the first to employ Jews for selling, buying, and exchanging gems. Jews were prominent also in engineering. In 1444, a decree of the Senate called a certain Solomon, a Hebrew by race, to be present at conferences concerning the diversion of the Brenta, because he has great fame for skill in matters concerning water. The Jews were very contributing to society, and we were never appreciated. We were just kicked out. You know? Wherever we go, we make the world rich, right? Wherever Jews go, we make the world a better place, and we make you rich. People have big houses, non-Jews, you know? Then you kick us out, and the world collapses. That's the punishment of the goy, right? The punishment. The punishment you get for mistreating us. Okay. In 1490, an engineer wishing to associate himself with some Jews in the mounting of a machine which he had invented asked the Senate whether the laws concerning the granting of privileges to inventors were applicable to Jews as well as to others. To this, the Senate replied that in such matters no distinction was made between Venetians and foreigners, between Jews and Christians. One Zarfati, in the second half of the 16th century, invented certain improvements in the methods of silk weaving, and his studies were published at Rome and obtained for him a privilege from Pope Sixtus V. In 1630, a certain Nachman Yehuda obtained permission to manufacture cinnabar, sublimate, and similar compounds on condition that the business should be carried on under the name of a Christian. In 1718, another Zarfati was permitted to manufacture not only cinnabar and sublimate, but also aqua fortis, white lead, minium, etc. In spite of restrictions, writing also flourished among the Jews. Grammarian Elijah Levita, who spent a great part of his life in Venice, noteworthy also were the two rabbis already mentioned, Leon Medina from 1579 to 1649, at whose sermons even nobles and ecclesiastics were present, and Shimon Simcha Lazato from 1590 to 1663, who besides the Discorso wrote Socrate Ossia del Intendimento Humano, which he dedicated to the dog and the Doge and Senate. Reference should also be made to the poetess Sarah Copia Salam, who was regarded by several critics as one of the most illustrious writers of verse in Italy. Other authors of this period who wrote in Hebrew were David Nieto, author of Matadan, Moses Gentili, author of Melechet Machshavot, his son Gershon, author of the Yad HaRozim, Rabbi Shimon Judah Perez, and Jacob Caravel. One of the conditions always imposed upon the Jews of Venice was that of keeping banks for lending money to ensure their continuances. The Condotta, the leadership of 1534, placed this obligation upon the Universitat as a body. So this is why the Jews got the stereotype that, we own all the banks, because they literally made us be the bank keepers because we were just good at it, you know. Although these banks at first satisfied the requirements of the citizens and were at the same time a source of gain to those who kept them, they finally ended in a great financial disaster. The community, which initially was very rich, declined rapidly during and after the war with the Turks over the islands of Candia in 1645 to 55, the cause being the enormous burdens laid upon it by the expense of the war. Many immigrated to escape these burdens. The plague of 1630, with the consequent stagnation of businesses, drove others out. Bad administration was responsible for other departures. So in order to fulfill its obligations, the community was forced to sink deeper and deeper in debt. the Jewish community, they had to like give all their money, which finally reached a sum of nearly 1 million ducats. They had no money to give. It looks like they were in debt because of the war and everything. As soon as the government saw the peril of an institution which was considered a necessity to the state, it endeavored to remedy the evil by adopting more favorable terms of payments and by making other arrangements within its leaders. Eventually, the Università was proclaimed a private corporation and enabled to legally announce its insolvency. What's insolvency? Insolvency. Let's see what that's. Situation where a debtor cannot pay the debts they owe. Bankruptcy. Right? Where are we? Where are we? Here. Right? Where are we? Okay, so where are we? Yeah, so it was enabled to legally announce its insolvency. It can't pay its debts. In 1735, the Universitas suspends payments and a compromise was effected with its creditors with the support and protection of the government. The banks continued to exist, however, even after the fall of the Republic until 1806 when they were closed by an imperial decree. On that occasion, the Jews gave the commune all the money and property in the banks, having a total value of 13,000 ducats to be devoted solely to charity. The municipality public expresses gratitude for this gift. So even though the Jews were bankrupt, they still gave the money, whatever was left. It looked like. The university recovered from its bankruptcy in 1776. On the expiration of one of the condotti, certain commercial restrictions were proposed as a check upon the excessive influence which the Jews had acquired. These proposals gave rise to many heated discussions. The majority sided with the Jews and called attention to the fact that several Jewish families had acquired large fortunes by their thrift and were hence of service to the industry, besides giving employment to many of the poor. The assistance that had rendered to the estate was also called upon, special emphasis being laid upon the noble conduct of Treves, who had loaned the treasury without interest the money necessary for the execution of the Treaty of Barbary. So, like, the Jewish people, we contributed, giving loans without interest, so you can pay it back however you want to pay back, but without extra money being owed, right? And helping, like, in the wars, and helping the poor people, and giving people jobs and everything, It wasn't perfect, but, it seems like... And this is probably where Jews got the stereotype, we're the bankers and everything, when literally the government is the one that forced us into this position, right? The non-Jewish governments. After a long debate, however, the passions and influence of a few powerful reactionaries prevailed, and the proposals became law. Under pressure from Napoleonic wars, the Republic declared all citizens equal, and all legal discrimination against the Jews became null. Each strove to outdo the other in demonstrating his fraternity, and on July 11, 1797, amid great popular rejoicing, the gates of the ghetto were torn down, and its name changed to Contrada da Union. Many speeches of lofty tone were made on this occasion, and even priests were present at the ceremony, setting the example of fraternity, for which they were praised. By the new municipality, the latter had been quickly constituted, and 3 Jews had at once taken their places in it. Yet even this revolution, though made in the spirit of the times, could not have saved the Republic, which was powerless before the invading armies of France. In the very month in which this change of government took place, Napoleon declared war on Venice, and the Senate, wishing at least to make an attempt at resistance, invited the Jews and the various religious corporations of the city to contribute all the available silver in their places of worship for the defense of the city against the impending attack. The Jews responded to this appeal. The attack, however, was never carried out. The Senate abandoned the Republic on October 17, 1797, and Austria and France signed the Treaty of Campo Formio, by which the city was assigned to Austria. Wow. So there was no attack, but there was a treaty, and then, Venice lost its control to Austria. Wow. When the news of the revolution in Vienna reached Venice in 1848, The city seized the opportunity to revolt and almost without bloodshed forced the Austrian garrison to capitulate in 1848. It then proclaimed the Republic of St. Mark and elected a provisional government of which 2 Jews formed a part. Isaac Pesaro Morogonato, appointed to the Ministry of Finance, and Leon Pincherel, Austria. So basically, because, we had a lot of knowledge on finances, right? They were put in this position, but this is why the Jews haters hated us so much, because we were just so smart. And Leon Pincherlo, Austria, however, reconquered the territory and held it until 1866. Austria reconquered it when it became part of the United Kingdom of Italy. From that time, the complete equality of Jews and Christians had been firmly established, as had happened in the rest of the country with the exception of Rome. Wow. Impressive. In unified Italy, Venetian Jews distinguished themselves in all fields. Samuel Romanin, the learned historian of Venice, Luigi Lozzati, who was prime minister and minister of the treasury, the Treves de Bonfili family, whose members still continue, as in the time of the Republic, to be distinguished for their philanthropy and for their services to their fellow citizens. The poetess Eugenia Pavia Gentilomo Fortis, the physicians Namias and Asan, and the rabbi Abramo Lattes. In the industrial field, the Venetian Jews were also well represented. Because the Jews were so successful, and we did, with the success, it brought the rest of the country into success, right? And a lot of non-Jews, they develop conspiracies, and they develop all these, theories, and they hate the Jews so much because we're, such a successful minority. Even though we give you so much, you still hate us, right? Being interested in many of the numerous factories and establishments on the islands around Venice, either as proprietors or as managers, playwright and political activist Amelia Pincherlo Roselli was also of Venetian origin. More complex is the analysis of the Jewish society during the fascist period, as a well-known figure, Margherita Grassing Sarfati, became central to the shaping of Italian culture, as well as Mussolini's international image. The rapid change and contradictions of the early 20th century, as well as the reactionary wave in the relation between church and state, placed Italian Jews in precarious situation, causing upjurs, conversions, and departures. The Venetian community shrank from over 2,000 members to 1,800. In 1931 and 1,200, in 1938, between December 1943 and August 1944, over a third of the Jews who were in Venice were arrested and deported. After the war, barely 1,000 remained in the city. Today, in spite of the small Jewish population, Venice is a subject of study and a destination for many scholars interested in the important culture that was formed there, as well as to understand the circumstances in which the first ghetto was created, ratifying in legal terms the relation between ruling power and minority that shaped all subsequent occurrences. Fascinating. Very good. I had to finish that because I just had to, because why did I have to finish that? Because I was trying to finish it for a long time, so right, finally I finished. Now I can take my dog for a walk. Right, okay, let's see what's the conversation. Show us the map where Dalmatia is no cheating. She used to read. You agree with the street shitter? Take us on a stroll. Dershowitz is a big Epstein fan. Yeah, maybe. Dershowitz likes little kids. He's gross then. Throw him in the jail. An older Jewish lady took me out to lunch once. Oh, that's sweet. Did you like her? She told me her son was making schmeckle movies. Maybe you should have joined. Toxic show as a kosher. The cat is telling her cat tired of hearing about Judaism all day. It wasn't about Judaism, it was about Venice culture. Founder of the polio vaccine was a Mott. He was a Jew, right? Doesn't get any kosher than that ceasing to exist. WeChat, we are more factual than any article you read. Yes, sure. Do you think there's a Jew tunnel under her house? You see, the Goyim, they accuse Jews of creating tunnels and everything, when in reality it's who's the one who has tunnels everywhere? The Muslims in Gaza. The entire place is one big tunnel. Under the houses? Under the houses, it's one huge tunnel, Right? Right, Raspberry? I want to go out before it gets completely dark. Right, Raspberry? Right, Raz? I outdid myself today. Learning so much. Learning so much. Yes. I love you. You ready to go outside? I'm going to go to the bathroom and then we're going to go. Wipe my feet. Right. And my headphones. Right. Tunnel under my house. I don't even own this. I live in a studio. You guys are so weird. You guys are full of conspiracy theories, you know? This is why you're all so silly, you know? You believe in conspiracies. What the hell, I love these now. Just for not being one of the chosen. Life is not fair. You could keep the 7 laws of Noah, and then you're one of us. Not exactly, but close. You know about the streak in the air, you know. How much is written in Tel Aviv? I don't know. I don't live there, okay? Bye, guys. I'm going. It's been real. I'm taking my dog out. Bye.